Well, I read Kid Eternity, drawn by Duncan Fegredo and written by Morrison. It's a 3-part miniseries, but it's actually 6 issues worth of material since each issue is a double issue with more than 40 pages. Pretty neat is the cover design, each of them showing one part of Kid Eternity's face, so you can join them together to one bigger picture. They did some hardcover deluxe edition some time ago. You can get it now for reduced prices pretty easily, but in this case I think I stick with my 3-issue version of it. On the very first glance, Kid Eternity is one of the examples where Morrison's writing skills met an appropriate artist. Duncan Fegredo uses pencils, watercolors and expressive, almost abstract experiments in a very imaginative manner. Same as Morrison is using the characters and long-established tropes around Kid Eternity in his very own, very imaginative manner. To be honest with you, I was absolutely unaware of the obviously rich history of the character, going back to the 40s and a publisher called Quality Comics. The character Kid Eternity was sold with the other Quality Comics characters to national periodical publications, which later on became DC. Much later, Kid Eternity seemed to be involved in some of the crisis events in DC and stuff. Some areas of comicdom of which I don't know much, if anything, about. But I figured that out only after I finished reading the series 2 times. So yeah, can't tell you anything about the Kid Eternity before Morrison, nor the Kid Eternity that came afterwards. That one afterwards was drawn by Sean Phillips, which makes it pretty interesting. But it was written by Ann Nocenti, and that's enough to keep me off the title because I haven't read much of Ann Nocenti, but what I read from her was simply a mess. Anyhow, talking about the version of the Kid at hand. Fegredo's art makes it instantly clear that this comic goes to dark places. Very moody, very sinister, and down to hell we go. That's the thing this comic clearly achieves, to create a very dark atmosphere. And some of the panels, especially the more free-flowing painted ones, are great examples of good comic book art, Vertigo style. Even this one was before the founding of the Vertigo imprint, but it definitely has the same feel like many of the later comics from Vertigo, like Hellblazer and such. Story-wise, we get the tale of one guy named Jerry who is injured in a car accident. Standing on the threshold to death, he meets Kid Eternity, this guy with the round sunglasses who was held in hell for 30 years and is the pawn in a bigger game between the powers of chaos and order. And there are layers and layers of story, and it makes sense, sort of, in the end, but it's pretty challenging, so at least I had to read it twice to get some grip on the story. I think you would be surprised if I say it wasn't, given that it's written by Morrison, but even for him, and you can argue, of course, that it's simply too much stuffed into this miniseries. For an example, there's this girl called Val Hoffman, who seems to be a main character, but other than some appearances here and there, we don't get much of an explanation in regard of her role in the overall scheme of things. Neither is Jerry, the main character aside Kid Eternity, fleshed out in a convincing way. This Jerry character is just this guy who is pushed around by the flow of events without adding something of real importance to the story. So, despite you can tell that it's not my favorite story from Morrison, I enjoyed reading, or rather unscrambling / decoding the story after all. So it's definitely a recommendation for all of you who can dig this kind of comic. For the others who want to read something from Morrison, I would recommend to start somewhere else, maybe with his Batman run or his Animal Man. Thanks for listening and watching. Goodbye.